For centuries, there was one name that was whispered in Rome with this incredible mix of, well, awe and just pure terror: Hannibal. He was the Carthaginian general who, for a solid 15 years, was basically the boogeyman of the Italian peninsula. A strategic genius who came this close to bringing the entire Roman Republic crashing down. So let's get into the story of Rome's greatest fear.
You know, this phrase, Hannibal is at the gates, it became a Roman saying for any kind of disaster. Long after he was gone, if some crisis hit the city, they'd shout these words. It just shows you how deep he got into their heads. He wasn't just an enemy, he was the very definition of catastrophe.
But this legendary rivalry, it didn't just spark to life on a battlefield. Nope, it started decades earlier with a promise. A promise made by a little boy that would end up charting the course for one of the most epic conflicts the ancient world had ever seen. Okay, so picture this scene as the old historians tell it. Hannibal's dad, Hamilcar, he's a veteran of the first really bitter war against Rome. He brings his 9-year-old son into a sacrificial chamber, and right there, he makes young Hannibal place his hand on the sacrifice and swear an oath that for as long as he lived, he would be an enemy of Rome. That one moment, it basically defined his entire life's purpose and lit the fuse for the Second Punic War. So, fast forward. Hannibal grows up, he takes command, and he doesn't just plan a war. Oh no. He plans an invasion, so bold, so completely out of left field that it caught the entire Roman world completely, totally off guard. See, the Romans totally controlled the seas, so a naval invasion would have been predictable and honestly pretty easy for them to stop. So Hannibal chose the impossible. He decides he's going to march his army, and yeah, that includes war elephants, all the way from Spain, over the Pyrenees, through Gaul, and then over the Alps, dropping into Italy from the north, where no one, and I mean no one, believed an army could ever come from. And that journey, it was absolutely brutal. He started with something like 40,000 soldiers and 38 elephants. He's fighting off hostile tribes the whole way, he's dealing with blizzards in the mountains. There's even this famous story where he used fire and vinegar to shatter a giant rock fall that was blocking his path. By the time he finally got down into Italy, his army was nearly cut in half, and only a handful of elephants had made it. It was a crazy gamble, but it worked. He was in Rome's backyard. And once he was in Italy, Hannibal just unleashed this campaign of tactical brilliance that would terrorize the Roman Republic for more than a decade. He wasn't just winning battles, he was literally rewriting the rules of war. Right away, he starts racking up these incredible victories. At the Trebia River, he used the freezing cold and a hidden ambush to just shatter a Roman army. Then, at Lake Trasimene, he pulled off what is still considered the biggest and most successful ambush in all of military history, trapping and destroying another huge Roman force. You can bet Rome was in a full-blown panic. But all of that was really just a prelude to his masterpiece, the Battle of Cannae. The Romans, they were sick of being outsmarted, so they gathered this massive army, we're talking maybe 80,000 soldiers, to just crush them with brute force. Hannibal, with a smaller army, did something absolutely brilliant. He put his weakest troops in the center, knowing they'd buckle under the Roman attack. This drew the legions deeper and deeper into a perfectly set trap. So as the Romans surged forward into that sagging center, Hannibal's elite troops on the wings just swung around like a closing door, attacking them from the sides and, crucially, from the rear. The entire Roman army was surrounded. The result was just annihilation. As many as 70,000 Roman soldiers were killed or captured. It's one of the single bloodiest days in the history of warfare, a disaster that should have been the end of Rome. Right after this unbelievable victory, Hannibal's cavalry commander, a guy named Marhebal, supposedly said these famous words to him. I mean, Rome was defenseless. The road was wide open. So why? Why didn't Hannibal just march on the city and finish the job? This is honestly one of the greatest debates in all of history. Well, the answer isn't just about Hannibal. It's about the incredible, almost unbelievable resilience of his enemy. Any other nation, any other power would have surrendered after a loss like Cannae. But Rome? Rome was different, and their response would change the entire course of the war. Rome completely changed the game. Hannibal was the master of the big, decisive battle. So the Romans, under a general named Fabius Maximus, decided they just weren't going to fight any. They started shadowing Hannibal's army, picking off his scouts, harassing his supply lines, but they refused to meet him in an open battle. It was a war of attrition, designed to slowly bleed Hannibal dry, thousands of miles from home. And the thing is, Rome could afford to wait. They had this seemingly bottomless pit of manpower to replace their terrible losses. They controlled the sea, which meant Hannibal was basically cut off from getting fresh supplies or soldiers. And maybe the most important thing of all, the Roman spirit just refused to break. Meanwhile, the government back in Carthage got nervous, and they never sent Hannibal the real support he needed to actually lay siege to the city of Rome.
So for years, it's this kind of stalemate. But while Hannibal is stuck in Italy, Rome produces its own military genius, a young guy named Publius Cornelius Scipio. He'd actually survived the disaster at Cannae, and he spent years studying Hannibal's tactics, learning from the very man who had humiliated his country. Scipio got it. He knew that to beat the monster, you couldn't fight him in his own lair in Italy. You had to draw him out. The final, epic act of this war wasn't going to be fought near Rome, but on the plains of North Africa. Scipio's strategy was just brilliant. He totally bypassed Hannibal and launched a direct invasion of Carthage's home turf. This move forced the Carthaginian Senate to do the one thing the Romans could never make happen: order Hannibal to leave Italy and come home to defend the city. After 15 long years, the nightmare was finally over for the people of Italy. So at the Battle of Zama, the two greatest generals of their time finally meet face to face. And in a wild twist of irony, Scipio uses Hannibal's own playbook against him. He uses his superior cavalry to outflank and surround the Carthaginian army. The student had become the master. For the first time in his career, Hannibal suffered a crushing, decisive defeat. The war was over. But here's the thing about Hannibal. His defeat on the battlefield didn't diminish his legend one bit. In fact, you could argue that his life after the war, and the respect he got even from his enemies, is what really cemented his place in history as something way more than just a great general. After the war, he actually became a statesman, trying to fix the corruption in Carthage's government. But Rome never forgave him. They never felt safe as long as he was alive. They hunted him across the Mediterranean, forcing him into exile, and finally, cornered by Roman agents, he took his own life. He drank poison, and his last words were reportedly something like, "Let us relieve the Romans from the anxiety they have so long experienced." There's this amazing story. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but it's too good not to tell. Years later, Hannibal and his conqueror Scipio supposedly met, and Scipio asks him, "Who do you think is the greatest general in history?" Hannibal says, "Alexander the Great, then Pyrrhus of Epirus, and then, third, me." So Scipio, probably a little surprised, asks, "Well, where would you have ranked yourself if you had beaten me at Zama?" And Hannibal's reply is just legendary. "In that case," he said, "I would have placed myself before Alexander." It's just an incredible statement, a boast of his own skill, but also this massive indirect compliment to the only man who ever beat him. And that brings us right back to the question that's been asked for thousands of years. This man brought the mightiest republic in the world to its knees and literally redefined military strategy forever. But what if he had taken that final step? What if, after the absolute slaughter at Cannae, Hannibal had marched on Rome? The entire course of Western civilization could have been completely different. It really is one of history's most tantalizing what-ifs.